welcome to Media Monitor on the SABC News Channel, independent and impartial. Now, this is where we take a look inside the world of media, analysing the trends and the issues and the reporting of some of the week's top stories. I'm Peter Ndoro, and this is what's coming up on the show. The COVID-19 coronavirus was announced as a pandemic by the World Health Organization this past week. Well, today we unpack how the media has been covering the deadly virus. Has the media been properly serving the public? We are hoping to cross to Limpopo for an update on the South Africans who were repatriated from the epicenter of the virus in China. And this week we go to Lesotho for the International Editor feature, where our correspondent talks to us about the Mountain Kingdom's stance on the COVID-19 coronavirus. In our News in History feature this week, we take you back to 1997, where the once powerful AWB right-wing separatist movement leader Eugene Terblanche found himself on his way to jail. So that's the show, and remember, you can engage with us on social media using the Twitter handle SABC, #SABC Media Monitor, #SABC Media Monitor. All right, so much to look forward to, and we'll be going through that in just a few moments. Now, the COVID-19 coronavirus has been declared a global pandemic, with over 155,000 people infected across the world in 123 countries. With the outbreak arriving in Africa and South Africa seeing more cases, the South African National Editors Forum, SANEF, this past week called on the media to practice ethical journalism when covering the COVID-19 outbreak. SANEF held a workshop in Durban under the theme Ethics, Journalism and Safety in the Digital Age. Our reporter Jadely Pulser caught up with Maria Papaya, SANEF's Media Freedom Chairperson, earlier this week, and this is what she had to say.
COVID-19 is certainly the biggest thing to hit our shores in recent months, and it's going to last for a long time. If we look at the issue around the infected, the doctor that was interviewed made it very clear that doctor-patient confidentiality is something that media must adhere to. The frightening thing about journalists trying to go undercover to hospitals is that not much known is about the spread of the disease. We're seeing carrier reports about individuals who were cleared, who are now not cleared, but passing on the virus. So for now, it is important that journalists maintain all of the rules of engagement that's necessary to get the story out, and that is remaining factual, making sure that all sides of the story is being heard, looking at the mandate that journalists should have around education, making sure that as the story breaks and unfolds, that the facts are put at the fore, making sure that experts are given a voice to talk and conscientize us and educate us about what's happening. There's so many elements to the story. There's a lot happening in South Africa. We know that the South Africans from China are being brought back home. They will be under quarantine. So the important thing is not to cause panic, but to look at the story in all of its entirety by making sure the facts are put on the table. We also know that in any virus situation, in any disease situation, when there is not much known, there tends to be a stigmatization of things. From that perspective, it's important for journalists to understand that and to also make sure that when reporting on it, to abide by the wishes of the infected. If they don't want to be known, they don't want their names mentioned, make sure that that doesn't happen. From the perspective of children, it's important that the rights that are afforded to children are maintained. And it's just one of those situations that journalists have to constantly be guarded and guided by the policies that cover how we report things.
All right, so that's setting up our conversation to talk about the coronavirus. And as you can see, there's so much to get through on the show this morning. And helping us make sense of these stories, our guest editors today, the editor of Behind the News Network, Joe Mhlanga, and head of programs at Media Monitoring Africa, Tandy Smith. To both of you, always a pleasure to have you in the program. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so COVID-19, coronavirus, the topic of discussion, and the question is the media been telling the story properly? Let me start with you, Tandy, because that's what you do, you monitor the media, and I just wonder, looking at it, what's been your first sense?
Well, I think that, it's only been a couple of weeks that we've actually picked up the stories or picked up the news in our local media. A lot of it has been very focused on international coverage. But what's really interesting is that we're seeing a lot of pushback around don't panic, and this is how you deal with misinformation, and not a lot of forward reporting with data and information and experts. We're relying very much on government sources and politicians and spokespeople, and we seem to be missing the let's see what the experts are saying and bringing that into the daily conversation. We are busy doing a far more in-depth analysis, which we will be, releasing and sharing in the next few days. But those are some of the key observations so far.
Not enough of the right voices are coming through. Joe, what's your initial kind of gut feeling?
You watch the news or you read. Most people who are covering this kind of stories are not medical experts in the first place. So they rely on information that was passed from one person to the other. And you also read, you find that in Europe there's a lockdown, in China there's a lockdown, in other countries there's a lockdown. You come to South Africa, wash your hands.
Yes.
So these are things that people are not sure. There's so much information about it. At the same time, they tell you to wash your hands all the time, don't shake hands, but at the same time, don't panic. Some information will leak. They said, no, it's fake news. So people are not so sure what's actually happening.
Right.
And I also think that the correct people to give out information are the medical experts themselves. But do we have enough people to give out that kind of information? We rely on the government. Is the government ready? Are we prepared for this? I know for a fact that my friends that live in the States, they said a lady came back from Europe back to USA, and she went to the clinic. They said, no, go back home. After 3 days, then you come back if it doesn't stop. And only to find that she has that. And how many people she has made contact with.
Yes, in those 3 days.
Because there's no enough information out there as to exactly what is it that we should do and what we should not do.
Okay.
So the media has to report. It's more of, we're not sure exactly how to contain or how to handle this or even how to report on it. No one knows exactly what's the story. And
I suppose it goes back to what Tandy's been saying, is that the right voices don't seem to be coming through. So what I want to do right now actually is I want to, because you talked about government, there's a part of me that's quite reassured that we've got a medical doctor in charge of this project in South Africa. In America, they've got Mike Pence, vice president, and I'm not sure that that's the person you want to put in front of this. So this is what Zweli Mkhize had to say about fake news in particular and the media reporting properly.
If for any reason someone falls ill or someone is found to be positive, they'll be removed from here, immediately evacuated to be taken for treatment. So here, they will not stay anyone who is either sick or has got any evidence of the presence of coronavirus. People who are going to be here are just under observation. I'm making this point continuously because I think it's important for the fake news not to affect our people, to think that we've brought in sick people in Limpopo.
So I think the minister has been at pains to try and say the right things, try reassure people throughout. I'm not sure what your take is. So let me start with you, Thandi.
I mean, I think that, you know, it is something unusual that we're dealing with from both Minister and Department of Health and media perspective. And I think that the government is really under a lot of pressure, like you say, to deal with it appropriately. And I mean, honestly, I think that, you know, if you think about the broader issues that we're dealing with as South Africa, this is really we are not ready, and we do not need another crisis. So I think, you know, regardless of how the media is reporting on it, I think that it is a massive challenge for everyone. But again, I think that the conversation around the highlighting misinformation and disinformation, it needs to, we need to be issuing and focusing on counter narratives more than we going, everyone calm down, that's just misinformation. What is misinformation? What is the counter narrative coming through? And we're not seeing that come through enough. But I do have to also say that I think that we have to see the positive part of how our government has been dealing with it. They have been communicating almost on a daily basis around these things. We got a very good, clear statement in the very beginning when we had our first case diagnosed, which is very different to how a lot of the governments are dealing with it overseas and in Europe and in the UK. So I do think that the level of transparency around it coming from government's point of view is a very good thing.
Do you think that we are quoting these officials properly? Because when I listen to the press conferences, they seem to be saying all the things that we need to hear, but I'm not necessarily seeing it in writing or the clips that are then chosen by the media houses.
I have mixed feelings about this thing, because what they seem to tell us, it's too general.
Yeah.
And remember, Peter, when you come back from Europe or any other country where you're coming from, as you land, there are these Department of Health people who are scanning. What are they scanning?
Your temperature.
You know?
That's it.
And that's where we should have, you know, our systems in check. Most people that we found out, we only find out once people are inside. And those are the people who are coming forward to say, I might have this. But how many people who are already in with it? So I'm not really satisfied with how it's dealt with. The government has a function to communicate. Are they communicating for the sake of communicating to say, yeah, we told them? Or are they not prepared for it? They don't know what to do. So they have to be seen busy. Nothing has been said as far as, is there, besides washing our hands, what else is there? So you will question, we need to, from our national key points where people are coming in, the controls have to be there. Do we have enough control? Are we capable? Do we have systems to dictate this or not? Or other countries, if they don't have systems, they just block. They said, no one goes out, no one is coming in. Are we doing that? No. Or is it, our people are still moving in and out?
I suspect things will change after the cabinet meeting today. But there is the other side of the story, because the chances are you're not going to die from coronavirus. They're very heavily in your favor that it'll pass through like a normal flu. And the recovery rate is not being reported as much, I think, as it needs to. So, for example, from 55,000 cases, 80,000 people have fully recovered from this disease. But I'm not seeing that coming through. Is that something you've observed?
Well, it is. I think that we have, you know, been very focused on sort of the alarmist reporting and the panicked reporting of going, this is a massive outbreak, look how many people are being infected and look how many people are dying, and, you know, we can't manage it. But what I find really fascinating is that we're not really hearing the fact that a lot of this data and a lot of these stats and information are coming from northern European countries, coming from Eastern countries, and the dynamic and infrastructure and population in general is very different to what we see on the African continent. And I don't know if that's maybe a factor in this, is that we just don't know how the virus is going to outbreak here. But, you know, I do think that we are being very alarmist in the reporting, but it's also, we have to find that balance on
so it could be
how
we have a bigger problem that we know.
Yeah, and how do you balance reporting on the seriousness of it versus, you know, just don't panic too much.
We're going to take a quick break, and then I want to get your take on this just after this. Stay with us.
A school with a great academic record, a beacon of hope for parents and learners. Now the principal faces charges of sexual grooming and manipulation.
The suspect was arrested by the FCS unit.
We have a reason to believe that the allegations have merit. Our labor section has immediately drafted a letter of suspension.
Let us now be mature. And I appeal especially to the political class. Don't divide these people, they don't deserve it.
Why?
Why what?
Why did you throw your name in the hat?
Well, I thought it was necessary to rise to the occasion.
There is a clause in the new legislation that allows for an applicant to go to the minister and get permission to campaign, for instance. Do you think that that is not a right approach?
No, that's totally undemocratic. It gives a lot of power to the Minister of Home Affairs of South Africa. Then he becomes the sheriff.
Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor, and today we're taking a look at how the media has been covering the story of this global pandemic, coronavirus, COVID-19, which has seen 155,000 people infected in over 123 countries. And as of Friday, well, South Africa had, in fact, as of yesterday, South Africa had as many as 38 cases. So the numbers have been rising quite quickly in the last few days. And we've been hearing more and more from various authorities, including the United Nations resident coordinator, that the media has a role to play. This is what she had to say.
I would like to see more of raising awareness in terms of what do you do, washing hands, minimizing socializing, and all these things should be part and parcel of the program of the radio, the TV, but everywhere we go, we should have reminders so that people will take the necessary caution, and because this is something that we need to do. Unless we do it, it's going to be spreading like wildfire. So we have to have this awareness raising and sensitization programs in all its forms, in songs, in ways of pamphlets, distributing pamphlets, but also in having on billboards, like what we did a little bit at the beginning of the HIV endemic. So we have to really activate or reactivate all the means of communication towards educating, informing, and communicating with all people without any exception.
All right, so that was the UN resident coordinator in South Africa, Nardus Bekele-Thomas, speaking to us about what she thinks the media should be telling in the stories that we're telling. All right, so just before the break, I started this conversation about the other side is not being told, and that's the recovery rate. And that China seems to have controlled the disease now. It was the epicenter. Maybe there are lessons to be learned about how they managed to do it. I'm not sure we can build hospitals in 10 days, but your thoughts, Joe?
There is this thing of numbers game. You know, they will tell you how many people in Europe, how many people in China, how many people in South Africa. We're focusing more on the numbers of people that are infected. We're not hearing of the recovery as much as we should. As far as China is concerned, it's very hard to get anything out of Chinese because most of the things are contained within themselves. I got a report from somebody in China to say the first case was in October.
Last year?
Last year.
Right.
So, and in December I was there. So, but how they contain these things, maybe it's because of their population, that if they go through panic, there will be chaos. But how they keep the information, the state-controlled information, sometimes you won't get to know if it's correct or it's not correct. But currently they are saying there's a lot of recoveries. There's about 800 people that have recovered, but then they have not yet released them back to the...
So you worried that maybe the whole story isn't coming out of China?
It could be coming from there, but it's very hard to get anything out of Chinese because the state-controlled information. And
was that your experience when you were there?
There was nothing much, but there were people that... I remember there was one person that was in hospital for 3 weeks, and when we communicated via WhatsApp, she said she had the flu. I only found out when I was back that that could have been that.
Corona.
So they had this thing from October.
Right.
So they say, and it only came out through media in January, February, and that's when everyone got panicked. But they knew this case. The first case was reported in October.
There was accusations that the Chinese government had been suppressing information and stopping the reporting actually of what was going on, that a doctor had been trying to warn them for some time. And then more recently we've started to see their ambassadors around the world on a, I don't want to call it a propaganda campaign, but they're even suggesting that this coronavirus didn't start in China, that it may have been brought into the country from somewhere else, almost trying to distance themselves. As the media, what should we be careful of in these kinds of instances?
Well, I think that you know the core thing is going back to the good, well, practical ethics and standards of journalism. Deal with the coverage and deal with the outbreak using the accuracy, fairness, objectivity, exactly the ethics and practices of standards that you would any other case. And I think that if you apply that to our journalism, we might be on the right track. And you know, we are really lucky that we are in a country where we do enjoy levels of media freedom and independent media, and many other countries are not as fortunate, like China. I mean, they're not exactly the proponents of media freedom and access to information. But I think that that's what we can do differently here. And that's where the media can dampen on misinformation, and that's the problem. But again, we do have a crisis of trust and credibility in our media, so it does make that much more difficult and put that much more pressure on journalists to ensure that they are at least putting forward as accurate and objective and diverse information as possible.
I mean, it used to be back in the day that a journalist joins a paper or a news outlet and you were put on a beat, and you did medical, you did law, we don't see so much of that. And I guess there's a danger when you don't have specialist medical reporters covering these stories, that these stories get covered properly.
I think that's where the problem is. Now, a person will just come out of the university and then they go to freelance and they'll just have to take what is available. You don't see, it's only sport and political. and motoring that seem to be having people. The guy that is reporting on motoring enjoys driving different cars. The sport, they got free tickets to do this. But as far as we are exposed, as far as medical reporting is concerned, because I don't think somebody who has studied medicine would like to work for the paper. So that's also a problem. But coming back, Peter, to the Chinese distancing themselves. Remember, when this thing came out, the timing was very critical because they have this trade war with US. So they believe that US unleashed the virus to dent
germ warfare.
Yes. So they are believing the reports that are coming out now. One professor from Harvard has been arrested in China because he's been accused that he was in contact with some student at Wuhan, one of the laboratories there. So they are taking this into a different stage now to say this is more of a biological warfare because US can't stand us. We can't go on a direct confrontation militarily. It's busy. They're busy. It's happening in South China Sea. But for them to be able to be really crushing them, if you lock China down,
this
will hurt their economy.
Is the big thing here. But we could discuss this for a long, long time. But thanks so much for giving us some insights on how the papers have been covering it. In fact, talking about the papers, let's take a look at what the front pages of our papers are saying. And most of them, as you would imagine, carrying the coronavirus. Let's start with the Sunday Times. And this is what it's saying. And the headline story there is "Shut Down." Now, this refers to a special cabinet meeting set to take place today on the spread of the COVID-19 coronavirus. The paper suggests that South Africa could introduce a total ban on travellers from Europe, order sports events to be held in empty stadiums, and also limit mass gatherings to 1,000 people. The City Press has the same story with their headline saying cabinet set to announce a crisis plan set to include travel bans, airport closures and limits on public gatherings, including over Easter. And that, of course, would affect that famous pilgrimage to Moria. That would be quite remarkable. Now, this is also a picture of the South Africans who evacuated from Wuhan, making their way to Polokwane for a period of quarantine. The Sunday Independence telling the story of the Labour Federation, SAFTU, calling for the head of Eskom, the CEO of Eskom, Jan Oberholzer. SAFTU General Secretary Zwelinzima Mavavi says that Oberholzer is a shareholder in one of the companies that allegedly defrauded the cash-strapped utility of 139 billion rand in inflated contracts. And the Sunday Tribune, well, that's the story there. And again, COVID-19 is the big story there. And let's go to the Sunday World, and their top story speaks. In fact, the Weekend Argus is also COVID-19. Same group of newspapers, so those are the big papers. But the Sunday World, let's take a look at that. And their top story speaks to a top actress who has laid a rape charge against a Johannesburg-based advocate. And this is 13 years after the incident. Apparently, she was on Generations and she asked this advocate to drop her off at home in Rosebank, and he took a detour. And this is allegedly what happened, but she can't be named for legal reasons. But that story, I'm sure, will gain some traction. All right, so that's the front pages of the print media. Let's take a look at what captured your attention and social media platform, Twitter, a short while ago. And this is the top trends. And yeah, there you go. We've got top trend, my Twitter anniversary. Can you remember when you joined Twitter? Well, everybody's sharing that. I think I was as far back as 2008. So I'm pretty old in Twitter. COVID-19, as you can imagine, and in there's really going to be about this cabinet meeting and what people are saying. But the one big one is this DSTV MVCA 2020, and that's the Multi-Choice Viewers' Choice Awards. And it's almost like, I guess, like the local kind of, I don't know, Oscars, I guess, for television. And let's take a look at some of the images of people, because it's always about the red carpet and what people are dressing and what they're wearing. But this actress who acts as in The River, as Lindiwe, I think was the choice for Best Actress, and I've got to tell you, she is incredible, really, really good actress. But the rest of it is just, what were people wearing? You've got to be seen, really. I mean, you know, it doesn't matter what you do in life as long as you're seen looking amazing, beautiful darlings, you know. So some inspirational clothes, and that's it. So there you go. COVID-19 Somizi. Quite inspirational stuff. Okay, so Boiti. So these are all the celebrities that we've all come to love, and some not so much, but that's the Multi-Choice DSTV Viewers' Choice Awards. And I think the thing about that is that it's the viewers that choose and decide who their top artists are. So that's what's trending on social media, on the platform Twitter. We'll have more for you right after this. Stay with us.
A school with a great academic record, a beacon of hope for parents and learners. Now the principal faces charges of sexual grooming and manipulation.
The suspect was arrested by the FCS unit.
We have a reason to believe that the allegations have merit. Our labor section has immediately drafted a letter of suspension.
Home Affairs, the City of Cape Town and the UN High Commissioner for Refugees appeared before Parliament's Home Affairs Portfolio Committee.
I'm on record as having criticized the leaders of this protester for misleading the vulnerable poor asylum seekers and refugees for their own selfish ends.
We are also concerned about the misinformation that continues to be circulated by protest leaders, bringing false promises to those who continue to join the protest group.
Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor. It's time now for us to go into our news archives, and today we take you back to 1997. Eugene Terblanche, remember him? Well, he was at one time one of the most influential people in the country when it came to right-wing politics. As powerful as he was, though, during the apartheid era, Terblanche soon became a shadow of his former self in the New South Africa. The man who, with his AWB army, stormed the World Trade Center in 1993, seemingly with little consequences, was just 6 years later making his way to prison as a convicted criminal. This is how the SABC covered that story.
AWB leader Eugene Terblanche has been found guilty of trying to murder a black worker and assaulting another black man. There was pandemonium in the Potchefstroom Magistrates Court this morning when verdict was handed down. Terblanche stormed out of the courtroom and tried to leave the building. He was later released on bail of 1,000 rands, pending sentencing on the 17th of June. Heidi Geldenes has this report.
27-year-old Paul Mutsapi will never lead a normal life again. The court found that the former security guard sustained severe brain damage when he was assaulted by the AWB leader. Terblanche, however, says he's innocent. He said Mr. Mutsapi suffered the injuries after he was hit by a truck. Terblanche said he found Mr. Mutsapi at the roadside and took him to hospital. The court also found the AWB leader guilty of assaulting petrol attendant John Nzama. Chaos erupted when Magistrate Chris Extian handed down the verdict. Terblanche stormed out of court and tried to leave the building. Tensions ran high amongst his supporters. The AWB leader said God will have to watch over the magistrate because the verdict would, as he put it, echo in every Afrikaner home. He said the court's action would lead to a war. He also said the magistrate had committed treason.
Ik gaan nou van platform naar platform elke dag dwars door Zuid-Afrika. Die ideaal van die AWB, van recht en gerechtigheid, van een uitstukje grond voor die boer, en een grond voor die Tswana, en een grond voor die Sotho, en voor die Zulu, gaan ik bepleit.
This will cause serious trouble in this country if this man is jailed today. He's a very prominent leader. He's an outstanding man, a man of great integrity. I know him for 30 years. And to do this to him today, he had the fullest right to walk out of this circus that they hold here.
Blanche is currently serving a suspended sentence of 18 months for public violence. This sentence could now be included in the sentence that will be passed in this case. After this morning's chaos, a case of contempt of court against Mr. Blanche has been forwarded to the Attorney General's office. Judgment in today's case will start on the 17th of June. Heidi Geldnys, SABC, Potchefstroom.
All right, so that was 1997. So much as history has happened since. Now, for the international editor feature, we're now joined by Rapelang Kgarebe, who's our correspondent in Lesotho. Let's go to him now and get a sense of two things. Let's start with the Moshoeshoe Walk, because that's a big thing in Lesotho, and it's one that's celebrated each year.
It is huge indeed, and good morning to our viewers too. It's a 3-day event which starts all the way from Menghuaning. This is the place whereby King Moshoeshoe I actually wanted to find a better fortress for his people. So they took this massive exodus from Menghuaning all the way to Thaba Bosile. So all they are doing is mimicking the journey, trying to find the places where he rested, trying to find that kind of experience, I think, that he undergone until he ultimately reached his destination, which is in Thaba Bosile. And the event gets bigger each and every time.
Do they just retrace those steps and then what? Is it symbolic?
Well, I think they have put, I think they put a spin to it this time. But what they do is that they try to identify vulnerable groupings of people, try to motivate them, try to leave some gifts for them. They have built schools around the journey. They have tried to identify even younger children that they can sponsor. So I think it's now a walk with a purpose, more than just another a trekking that moves in that particular region.
And then COVID-19, coronavirus. There were a couple of things that happened. Someone who came through the country with the virus, and then also fake news was thrown in the mix with seemingly government notices saying that borders are being shut. Take us through what's been quite an interesting week in terms of this whole COVID-19 story.
Yeah, quite interesting, really. I think Lesotho becomes a little interesting because of its regional settings or its geographic position inside South Africa. So whatever happens really causes a bit of a concern as to how much it can affect South Africa. But what happened was that there was a legitimate government notice, but we were told it was intended to be distributed internally, especially within the SADC regions. All it was saying, it was barring that there will be a barring of civil servants traveling to those designated areas. But then I think it was really badly written. It interpreted to say there will be a lockdown, there will be a shutdown, if you read it, because it was saying people will not be going out of the country and others will not be coming into the country. It was only when we tried to get further clarification onto it and then we discovered that no, it was actually supposed to mean that the civil servants, the high commissioners, even those working in the non-governmental sections are actually required not to travel. So there's an interim travel ban, saying to them they should not go to other countries, and saying vice versa. So I think it raised a bit of worry as to whether are they saying the country is now on a lockdown.
Are people being properly informed? What's your take on the media in Lesotho?
I think it's only now that the message is getting a bit of a concerted effort, because we got haphazard messages. Everybody was communicating from their quarters, and there was no one approach, one coordinated message that came straight from government as to what exactly should be done. Some were conducting tests when you go through the border. Other messages were more scaring than informative, as to tell. And now with government saying they think South Africa should and discourage people from traveling to Lesotho over the Easter holidays, also brought another big scare, because some people will probably use illegal means to cross into the border. That means they will not be detected. So I think the government really needs to sit down and draft a well-concerted effort message that goes, speak in one language, speak to one audience, and actually give a clear definition as to what will happen.
All right, Rabelang, that's where we'll leave it. Thanks so much indeed for joining us and giving us a take from Lesotho how some of these issues are playing out. Thanks so much for your time. Right, that's our correspondent in Lesotho, Rabelang Khadebe, speaking to us from Maseru. All right, let's come home to South Africa and the newspaper covers. I suppose let's start with this cabinet meeting and these headlines: shut the borders, shut down the country. We've seen this in other parts of the world, and I suppose we're starting to slowly catch up. Let me start with you, Joe.
Is it not too late?
There's only 38 people positive at the moment.
Oh, that is recorded.
Okay.
And of which, how reliable are those sources? As I said earlier, while they're discussing that, the planes are landing. People are going in and out. So what are the systems that we really have? Other people had the room and then they shut down same time because they did. For us, are we relying on those numbers that we are told? What about those people that are not detected?
Don't know that they are.
And they don't even know. So for me,
it's too late.
Yeah. Every minute, every second where these people are sitting and discussing that, it's not stopping.
All right.
So why are we late?
Okay, we can explore that and the other stories right after this break. Stay with us.
Home Affairs, the City of Cape Town and the UN High Commissioner for Refugees appeared before Parliament's Home Affairs Portfolio Committee.
I'm on record as having criticized the leaders of this protesters for misleading the vulnerable poor asylum seekers and refugees for their own selfish ends.
We are also concerned about the misinformation that continues to be circulated by protest leaders, bringing false promises to those who continue to join the protest group.
ANC and EFF are staging a walkout because they don't want the DA Speaker, Katlego Matebe, to continue.
We can't have a person now that is being investigated and so on. She must step aside and allow the process to conclude.
The real reason why the ANC and EFF collapsed the meeting, the two parties have been negotiating to take over the city.
Our immediate task, which we want to do now, is to get rid of the DA executive in the city.
We took a decision out of that meeting to place the Tshwane Municipal Council, to dissolve the municipality and appoint an administrator.
Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor, and we're unpacking the front pages of the newspapers in South Africa now. And so, Joe, just before the break, you said that these headlines are interesting, but you fear that the action has come a bit late. Tandy, which paper, which headline grabbed your attention? I've got to say, the shutdown word in the Sunday Times really spoke to me, because I associate now that with what we're seeing in Italy, what we're seeing in America, what we're seeing in New Zealand now, what we're seeing in Korea. And I wonder if that's where we're going.
Well, I mean, honestly, I think it's difficult to say. I think we do need to wait and rely on the experts to make these decisions. I agree that we should have been far more informed of plans or lack thereof, a week or two ago. But also what I find really interesting is if you look at the headline between Sunday Times and City Press, they've got very different tones to it. So Sunday Times, big capital letters, shut down. I mean, you see that, and if you don't actually read the story, it could mean anything. Are we being shut down right now? What's going on? So Sunday Times, I feel like that's a bit alarmist, and it's not very accurate. But City Press, cabinet set to announce crisis plans. It's the same thing, but it's going, okay, we're meeting, we're going to tell you what the plans are. Whether it's late or not, I think that's a complete side issue. But if we're looking at headlines,
so you think the City Press is a bit more honest with their
I don't feel as panicked when I look at City Press than when I look at Sunday Times, but we're dealing with the same issue, which is, I mean, it speaks volumes to how we're reporting on these issues.
So both of them have got a picture of the South Africans that came back from China, and that's been an interesting debate in the past week. Should they be allowed back? Polokwane, is it safe for the local residents? Joe, what's your take on the way that story was told and explained?
Again, Peter, it's vague. There's no one way of telling what's actually happening. There's no... I'm still going to say the same thing. We are not ready. We were not ready. Sometimes I wonder if we'll ever be ready to deal with this kind of crisis. Same thing that when you look, the different views, it's the same story, the different views on how it's being reported. Here, like she said, it's a shutdown. It's like it's a done deal that we're going to shut down. That side, but the small letters, it says now, they're going to discuss on how it will happen. Almost a month later, we waited for something to happen. Then I still believe that the moment it came out, our relationship with China, we know the movement between ourselves and China. We should have had plans. I don't know if this should be part of BRICS, to discuss at the BRICS level to say, since we have this problem, what do we do then? But Russia was quick to say, no, Chinese people must come in. We, the last nation to say, wash your hands. Well, we should be seriously planning. I'm not sure if they sit in parliament and they discuss how we should wash our hands. I don't know. But to me, I still feel we don't know what to do with this problem. The reporting, they still don't know what to say, since we see all these things here. There's no real expert to tell us. And those experts that Tandy was talking about, do they know what to do? Were they ready for this?
And it is interesting. And maybe the media, this is where we need to play a role, perhaps, in provoking the authorities. So the Premier League was shut down in America, in the UK. The NBA was shut down in the States. Formula One, tennis tournaments, and I haven't seen the media go after the PSL, CAF, for sporting events. Only now, after New Zealand had said, look, anyone coming to our country is going to be quarantined, did we see rugby stopped. And I wonder if the media should have been playing a role in demanding answers from the authorities.
Well, I mean, this is highlighting one of the critical roles that the media do play, and that is asking the difficult questions and holding those in power accountable. And I think we aren't seeing enough of that. I don't think media are necessarily asking the right questions. you know, in like you said, demanding to know what's going on. It's sort of a wait and see game at the moment, which I think, you know, might not be the best way to do this. But you know, I suppose we can only hope and you know, wait to see where the media do take up the challenge of really holding those in power accountable and those responsible for giving us the information we need. But it goes back to the whole issue of, do we have health expert journalists? Do we know how to report on these issues accurately, or do we just fall back into the same patterns that we tend to do? And I'm worried that is happening.
Joe, has the media helped create panic or not? Because, you know, the other day I went to my local chemist to try and buy sanitizers, and they were all sold out, everything. I mean, this is stuff that I used to get all the time, but who contributed to that? Was us, the media, or do you think, what's your take?
Part of the media in this case became a marketing tool for the big pharma companies, or what it became a business because people read and hear even through social media. So what the media did, it was to make people aware, but like she said, there was a panic in it. Hence, you go everywhere. Now people are even using petrol. They're using all sorts of things to wash their hands.
Petrol?
So, yeah. So it created panic more than anything.
But I also don't think you can ignore the mis and disinformation that's been viral on social media around us. I mean, you just mentioned petrol, and I think that's something that we haven't unpacked enough, and it is ridiculous. But it is something that we have to deal with, and that media have to come back and counter, which we're not seeing a lot of.
Do you think that we've also,
I think it's because no one knows exactly what to do. So people are just trying. They are in panic. They are running. They don't know where they're running to.
We have been saying, wash your hands, limit social contact, don't gather. Once you've got symptoms, go and get checked out.
But do we have enough equipment to know the symptoms?
Right.
Is it just flu? Or is it just that I was in the rain? Or I was in the office where the air cons are high? So how do we get to that part? My issue is that how do we, are the symptoms in sequence? Or are the symptoms, what if you start with a headache? But because people are different, we're not the same. We're not just one DNA that it will happen like this. So what we're looking for now, it's like we're looking for this symptoms here, it will equal to this, then you have it. Now, if you cough in public, people will push you away. It could be. So we're still not sure exactly what is going on. I can tell you that there are people that they say it's corona and it's something else. It could be just flu. How do we know?
Do you think that we've also perhaps got into a false sense of security because whilst it was factual that people who had travelled were the ones that presented with this disease, and so you almost thought that this is a rich man's disease and that we're not going to get it, those that can afford to travel. And we haven't really told the story that once they're here, once people are around, we can all catch it.
Well, I think, you know, what we seem to be missing very much of is localizing the issues and localizing the solutions as well. I mean, what do we do when we're getting told repeatedly to wash hands and keep social distance when we have a massive percentage of our population without access to water and sanitation and who physically can't practice social distancing because you're living in close proximity to one another? Where do the solutions in those circumstances come from? And we're not hearing that story.
And to add to what you're saying, we were told that we should avoid, but there was a match yesterday.
Yes.
You know, there was a big match yesterday in Tembisa. So maybe there's another match today. So how do you now say something else and certain things are still happening? We still have taxes. We still, like she say, we can't afford certain things that they say we must do. If they say I must wash my hands, if I don't have water, how do I wash my hands? If I can't afford those, what do you call it?
Yeah, those little sanitizers.
So how do we
This is a conversation that will not end, but we now wait to see what comes out of Cabinet, because that's going to be the big milestone.
Absolutely.
It could be that our lives are going to change from next week. But Tandy Smith, Joan Planga, both of you, thanks so much for being brilliant guest editors and having you on the program again.
Thank you very much.
To you at home, thanks so much indeed for watching Media Monitor. We hope that you'll join us again same week, same time next week for more of the same. Have a great week in between. Bye-bye.